Technical Steering Committee meeting for the 3rd of September 2020. We're going to follow the agenda that was created in the repo, and which is TSC issue number 915. Before we start, does anybody have any announcements that they would like to share? Okay, no announcements this week. I don't have any board updates. I don't know, Mary, if you have any, and I don't know, maybe there was the announcement that Mary's now our CPC representative. So thank you for taking that on. And I guess I'll ask, do you have any updates from the CPC front?
No updates from the CPC front.
Okay. Making the quick note on taking CPC rep from Theo. Okay, so we'll move on to the issues tagged for the agenda. The first one is 34887, which is backport, simpler and faster readable stream async iterator. I wasn't entirely sure whether this needed to still be on the agenda or not. And I guess, let me just take an issue because I know Rona commented on that. Basically said, not sure, it wasn't me that agenda. It looks like right now nothing's happening. So I guess one thing to discuss is whether there's been sufficient collab feedback on how that could be achieved. So I think the discussion we had previously is, there's some concerns because it is Semver major and a change. And, the question there is there enough, do we need more TSC input or, reviews from that perspective? We do have, I guess, as a Semver major, is it? I know this is right now, Kim, remembering this is a backport of a Semver major, but tagged to be non-Semver major. I guess, does anybody have any thoughts or discussion that makes sense who are here? I think otherwise, the ask is to go back and review that as TSC members so that we can get some more input there.
Speaking as an LTS and release individual, like I see that Mateo is chiming in and saying that he thinks it's a good thing to do. So I think that the challenge right now is just getting CI to pass. So like to me, if the folks from the streams team are +1 on this, like I don't know that subsystem. I trust them that this is a good thing to consider backporting. And just as long as CI is green, I'm personally okay with moving forward.
Okay. Anybody else? Comments? Okay, if not, we'll move on to the next issue, which is rename default branch from master domain or something similar. That's 33864. I think also, like maybe, sorry, going back to the previous one, do we agree that we can take the TSC tag off? Like, it doesn't sound like there's any objection to it landing. Okay, discussed. Okay. Sorry, just taking a time to do that. Okay, so moving on to the next one, rename default branch from master to main or something similar, 33.864. I know there's been some work where we've switched it for some repos, and I believe Mary has also switched the default for the organization. Anything else people want to add?
Quick point of order, Rich needs to be promoted.
Thanks.
And then, yeah, we changed the branch for Canary in the gold mine. It was rather painless, and there's been no problems. Now, like that repo does not have like the level of engagement of some other repos. So obviously, you know, much easier to land there. Now we do also have Node.js.dev, which is one of the ones that I talked about doing but have not done yet. And that one would be slightly more complex as it has integrations into both continuous, like CI and CD.
Okay.
That depend on it. I have more pull requests open, but the tools that we used worked fine. The redirects for HTTP links are working as expected. I think that there's still maybe a few more features in GitHub, especially the Git redirect stuff that we'd like to see before core repo. And I can follow up. I haven't checked in the last couple of weeks, but I can look at where the roadmap is internally at GitHub to see where that stuff, when that stuff may be landing, that will make it easier for us to move the main repo.
Right. Okay, sounds good. Default changed for new repo creation. Okay, anything else anybody wants to add on that one before we move on? If not, okay, let's move to the next one, which is process change default unhindered rejection throw, 33.021 and 916. I think, Mary, you've been leading that, so do you want to bring us up to date what we need to discuss today?
Yeah, so our next step is to conduct the voting for this issue. I opened an issue to discuss the format of the voting. I don't see any objection so far on what was suggested, except for the anonymous voting. Apparently people prefer that the voting is not anonymous. So I think next step is to find a tool that we can use that keeps the vote private, but that other TSC members can see how the vote is going. And if not, we are going to have to use GitHub somehow.
Yeah, that was, I guess my suggestion was that it does influence at least my thoughts, what other people's thoughts are. But, you know, it would be interesting to hear the rest of the TSC's feedback here is like, you know, is fully private make sense? Or, you know, I was suggesting maybe, you know, it's public among the TSC, but we don't then say who voted how publicly, or, you know, what do people think makes sense? You know, fully public is another option that, you know, we've done for some votes in the past too.
So one quick question that I have here, I've missed a few of the discussions, so apologies in advance. Is the TSC itself extremely conflicted? Like, is there a zero chance of reaching consensus on this? Mary, you strike me as someone who has spent probably the most time researching, talking to people. Like, is there a possibility, any possibility, that perhaps you could propose one particular solution that you think is the best and just see one last time if perhaps we could reach consensus on it, or is a vote inevitable? And again, I see conclusion.
We can try, but even after the survey, I'm not entirely sure if we have consensus on the TSC.
I guess it's that Miles is suggesting that's our preferred approach. So just making sure we've exhausted that could make sense. I think that's what you're suggesting, right?
Before
Yeah, and
the
I'm not even
survey-
saying that we spend. Oh, sorry, I have a delayed connection, so apologies for speaking
No
over you.
problem. So before the voting, I think there was at least two dissenting opinions.
Okay. Two quick things. First, a point of order, Bethany needs to be promoted.
Thank you.
And then the second thing I was going to say is I think that we should vote if we can't reach consensus, but I would personally appreciate, like at this point, Mary, because you have spent so much time thinking on this, I myself would likely defer to what you think. So if you were open to it and wanted to, even just on a private list, just make a suggestion and call for objections. I think just one last time of seeing if we can do this after all that research may just save us time of going through the vote process. If we do go through the vote process, I personally volunteer to help you figure that out if you'd like support, and happy to follow through. So not saying that we shouldn't do it. I just kind of, I have a feeling that may be wrong, that perhaps we can actually avoid a vote here.
Yeah, I think we can try that, but I think it's a good idea to also prepare for a vote preemptively, so we can send the last suggestion to the TSC mailing list, for example.
Yep.
But also prepare for a vote in case someone has an objection.
That sounds perfectly reasonable. I can dig it up. When we were coming up with voting strategies for the CPC, I did a lot of research on voting technologies. Also, I did some for ECMA for some related stuff. I'll put some time on my calendar tomorrow to gather all that research and share with you. So it'll just be a survey of different technologies so we can pick one.
Perfect, thank you.
And do people have any thoughts, like preferences over, public, private, what the mix of that would be? Because I think that's going to be one of the things that factors into the choice of those, right?
Personally, I think that if folks internally on the TSC are like yourself, Michael, are saying that seeing the opinion of others is important in making a decision, and I also kind of feel that way as someone who's not deeply embedded in this, I think for ourselves that may be useful. On the flip side, I think that if folks are expressing concern and having their opinions being public, we should respect that as well. So to me, kind of splitting the difference there seems reasonable. But I think also we should look at what platforms we're looking at using and what the constraints of those platforms are, really, before we can make too many decisions.
Yeah, makes sense. I guess I'll ask a concrete question. Is anybody here, would anybody here object to it's public to the TSC members, but we don't then publicize how people voted beyond our group? Okay, sounds like not. So anyway, that's gives us a starting point as a suggestion that we can make. Okay. Anything more, Mary, that you want us to talk about on that one before we move on?
So for reaching consensus, does it make more sense to send to the TSC mailing list or to open an issue on the TSC repo?
I don't think we can use a public issue if we don't want to have, if it comes to a vote and we've already had non-consensus in public, it doesn't make sense to have the vote in private. So I think just to have the option of having the vote in private, or like public to the TSC, but private to the rest of the world, we can't do the first discussion in public.
We could use a private discussion on GitHub for the team, though.
That's
more
Yeah.
an issue in the private organization.
I mean, is that better than an email where we just send, hey, this is a suggestion?
Yeah, it's
No,
better than an email because then people who weren't participating but join later can, have it. I know TSC membership doesn't change often, but
So sorry, you're saying the discussion issue is better because that's like historical, right?
my opinion, yes. But I think
Yeah,
Mary
okay.
was going to say something. I talked over her, so let's see what she has to say.
it was not related to opening the discussion. I think opening the discussion is fine. And should we comment on which mode we are going to try to go to consensus on the issue? Or should we keep this private until we have a decision?
I guess if people are uncomfortable with the public discussion, then maybe it makes sense to make that suggestion. Because otherwise yeah, go ahead.
I personally guess the biggest reason for a vote would be, if I remember correctly, Mary suggested to have multiple votes so that we could then go for the option that got most votes.
Yeah, if we fail consensus, we should go to a voting system that allows one of the options to have more than 50% of votes. So one option is to have 2 votes at least, or at most. And the other option is to allow for multiple choices on the vote.
Just to just to keep instructions simple and avoid confusion, I would say let's have multiple rounds. Just
So if I may suggest something, if we are all fine with voting internally in a TSC, then I would suggest we could just, each one of us sends an email with all the options and that they personally would feel comfortable with. And then we check as soon as everyone voted or sent that email, then we just count them all together and see what is the outcome.
So that voting strategy would be approval voting, which was one of the things that we had discussed, as opposed to runoff, which is a possibility as well. And just take the one that has the most approval.
I have a feeling that if we go with approve voting, we are going to have a different result from if we go multiple rounds. So I don't know which one is more appropriate here.
So with multiple rounds, it would probably be that you would vote again with, let's say, the 2 highest votes altogether, a second round, or?
Yes.
I did not follow the discussion that closely.
Yeah.
I mean, we can do that as well. I personally would suggest to just decide on the concrete voting process right now.
All right, I think the next steps we had was Miles was going to send Mary a list of the different technologies we could use.
Yeah, but
and then there'd be a proposal on that.
I believe we do not even need really a technology for it, but just, I mean, if we want to hide it from each other, then we would need something. But otherwise, I personally believe that it's sufficient to just send the email out with all the different possibilities that we personally support. And that would be like a first round if we want to have multiple rounds of the approval voting. And then we would have a second round with the 2 highest contenders. would everyone feel comfortable with that? Or maybe asking it the other way around, does someone not feel comfortable with it?
Yeah, I'd be fine with that, to be honest.
How much choices are going to be in the last vote again?
So we just spoke about the two highest contenders.
Yes, that sounds fine. Because if we select from multiple highest contenders, there are going to be predictable problems with that. So if we choose only the two ones, I think that should work.
Cool. In that case, I guess we should just start an email thread with that.
So I think, the suggestion was for Miles that, Mary send out a proposal just to see if we can get consensus. If there are objections, then we can move to voting using something along those lines. Does that sound like the next steps?
Yes.
Okay, any other discussion on this one before we move to the next issue? Okay, if not, let's move to the next one, which is 3306, Black Lives Matter, convert to button. I think, Miles, you put that on the agenda.
Yeah, that was on the agenda before. I don't know if it needs to remain on the agenda. I think it was like a request from the individual in the issue asking for us to kind of chime in. It's a small design change of, changing the way the banner looks. I personally prefer the way the banner looked the way before. Looking at the comments, it looks like Mary likes the way the banner was before. Michael, it looks like you like the new design a little bit better. I think that there's maybe a broader conversation, which we are already having, about what are the next steps with this program and
Yep.
what we've done here, which I think is out of scope from this. To me, I honestly am willing to just say, like, hey, if the collaborator who opened this PR cares about it that much and really believes it's better, then we can just do it. Although I do think that the existing design is better.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, as I commented, I looked at it, had a preference, but I don't feel strongly one way or the other. It sounds like you're, similarly, you don't feel strongly the other either, so. So, I mean, are you suggesting that we just go ahead and land it?
Well, I mean, it's still as a draft. I guess like we could go to the collaborator and ask if, and just to confirm, Michael, from yours, because it was a little hard to read, did you prefer the one with the white space on either side or the one with the gray bar going the whole way across?
The one with the white space.
Okay, so let's just do that. If we've got at least one person who likes that better, and the person who opened this PR cares about that, I'm easy.
Okay, I mean, Anatoly just commented he slightly prefers the other version too, so it's kind of like, Okay, so you're basically saying let's just do it. Does anybody object to that? Okay, so we'll basically say there's no objections to this landing.
Mary has something she wants to say
Oh,
about
sorry.
the promise. No,
Go
about
ahead.
the promise discussion. So
Okay,
Yeah, we can finish this one first.
okay. So I'm just going to make that comment in the issue that there's no objection to this landing. So it can go ahead, right? Okay, so let's move on.
move back.
So I went to open a discussion on the TSC team on GitHub, and the private option for discussion is still visible for organization administrations, which I think counts Comcom and moderation as well. So I don't think that's an option for us. We should probably discuss everything via email then.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Just a question in round, do we actually still have something to discuss in this case, or could we just go straight away to express our opinion on different options? Because that's what I would suggest. I guess every one of us in the round has an opinion already.
I think it was whether or not we can actually reach consensus on one solution before forcing a vote was the last thing that was, hoping to be seen.
So I think, and that was just a, here's a proposal that we think has the most support. And if there's anybody who doesn't agree with that, then it goes to the vote. Does that seem reasonable, Ruben?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay. Okay, so we'll move on to the Node TSC issue package manager discussion 904. I again wasn't sure if this needed to still be on the TSC agenda.
James commented on the TSC meeting issue, saying that it doesn't need to be on the agenda anymore.
Okay, so it does not need to be.
It can be removed.
Okay, I will remove the tag. Since it was on the agenda, is there anything that I see that label's actually already been removed? Anything that people did want to talk about? Okay, so let's move on then. Audit Google account access. I know, Rich, you'd pinged Brian, who said he would get to it. I haven't seen anything yet on that front, though. I know he's very busy, so we should just leave that. I didn't see any updates for the strategic initiatives, but on the build front, I don't have any update other than Johan, who was quite active before, is getting more active, so that's good. Let me quickly switch to the other strategic initiatives just to see if we have Miles. I don't know if there's anything to update on modules.
One thing that's worth talking about, there is an open discussion right now on Node.js Node about a new exports feature for wildcards. There is a bit, like, people do not have consensus. It's called module exports patterns. So I'll just drop it in the chat in a second as it's loading. We do not have consensus as a team if this should land, although in general, it seems like the feelings are there's some people who are, very very much want to see it land, and then there's some people who feel uncomfortable about it, but not like so uncomfortable that they'll block. Sokra from the Webpack team also just came in with some comments as well. It would be very interesting, you know, like I know the TSC has not been super active in the module stuff, but we're getting really close to the interface being considered stable. And at least for myself, like I was not super bullish on this change, which would add the ability to use wildcards in the export map to define extensions to allow for optional extensions in import statements. I personally find that it adds complexity that we don't have right now and makes the feature a little harder to teach. But since a number of people are bullish about it, I'm not like in a position to block. But this one in particular is one that I think would be good for us all to take a look at and maybe think a little bit more holistically about what kind of experience we want to have with our module loader and how much, you know, like magic and features we want to introduce. If any folks need a bit of kind of like catching up as to like where we're at right now with it, I'm happy to find time to talk to you one-to-one and give you kind of like a unbiased 10,000 foot view of like where we're at from a feature capacity and what this would accomplish. I'm trying my best right now to not tarnish introducing this with my own opinions.
Okay, thanks. Mary, anything on future of build chain?
The repository was created to organize the discussions on this initiative, and I started creating some issues, but on the implementation side, nothing yet.
Okay. Created issues. Okay, sounds good. Thank you. The other thing I might mention is not necessarily a strategic initiative, but in the team that's been looking at the next 10 years of Node initiative, I would like to just paste the draft. Sorry, next 10, just for awareness. We've been working like to, you know, the goal is to come up with, you know, the technical direction, goals, plans, whatever we want to call them. And in those discussions, we fell back to, you know, needing to define priorities, capture the technical values and priorities of the project. So we've been working on that the last few meetings, and this pull request, I think, reflects something which is pretty close. It's from the people who've participated. It's what we think reflects the values and prioritization of the project. Next step is to open a PR in Node Core to add a document which captures those, which we'd likely do, you know, making sure we have consensus among those who are participating in the effort first. Once we do that, we'll, you know, I might plan maybe next week sometime to open the issue, but if people can take a look in advance, that would be good as well. At that point, we are at the end of the agenda. Is there anything else that people would like to talk about before we move into a private section? Nope. Okay, so I will stop the stream.